reading this morning is from Matthew 14, verses 13 to 21. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed those who were ill. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he told the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, who gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Amen.
Before I begin looking at this passage, the song we just sang there was written by a guy, Brian Dirksen. He died just in the last 10 days or so, I think. And he talked about his songs being like seeds that he just sent out, that some blew and some were planted and so on. But Faithful One, So Unchanging, that was another one of our favourites that we sing here. Just a great ministry. He was only 60 years old as well, so yeah, he gave a lot though in his time. Well, little he have, he gave, and the Lord blessed that. So let's think about this passage today. This is a familiar story. I mean, we taught this in school and things like that, and Sunday school and whatnot. So we've heard this story probably. Oh, some of you have heard this hundreds and hundreds of times. This story over the years, when you think about it, and I wonder, how does it make you feel when you hear it? Give me some words. Throw out some words. What's your reaction to it when you hear this story? Awesomeness of what takes place, what Jesus does. Yeah. Impossible. Which could, interesting word to plant in there, because it could be taken different ways. Are there any skeptics there? Anyone disbelieve? Anyone think unlikely? Any other words? Warm. Yeah. Yeah, a feeling like it, just of his presence, of his provision and things. Yeah. Power. Yeah. Interesting. Care. Yeah, that Jesus is interested, and because it would have been. I mean, he could have just sent them away. It was the disciples' suggestion was a practical solution, and Jesus could have said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Let go for it." But he cares enough that he would keep them there, keep them with him, keep on doing what he was doing with the crowd, and feed them himself. Anything about it you wonder about? Anyone got any questions about it? Anyone got anything that they've always wanted to ask about it? Anyone got anything that they are confused about with the story? How you managed to pull that off? Yeah, how you managed to do that? Yeah. How did that little bit of bread and the fish actually multiply enough for it to accept it at face value that it happened as it's described? Maybe a power that we can't get our head around. Anything else? Anyone else got any questions about the story? Mind-boggling. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look at the text then. Let's go through it, and maybe it'll bring up new thoughts in your mind, or maybe it will help answer some questions. So let's put it in a little bit of context, just immediate context, in that we're told that Jesus is withdrawn by boat. He's gone away from the crowds. Now, we've got good reason for this, because we read in the verses leading up to this in Matthew 14, we learn of the death, of course, of John the Baptist, who has been beheaded. And Jesus, just before this miracle occurs, is told that terrible news. So there's reason that he is away. Jesus is grieving, effectively, in this moment. He is grieving. John was family. John was second cousin, first cousin, months removed, perhaps, or we don't know his exact relation to John, but he was family. We know that much. Jesus is sad when this miracle occurs. And I think it's important to know that, because it helps us understand why he's away from the crowd, why he's taken himself away, why he's needed time away from them. And then we have this picture of them following him. And you might imagine in that situation, when you're hurting, you're grieving, and the crowd comes chasing you. Now, you see videos online, don't you, of celebrities being accosted in the street for a selfie. Usually, it used to be an autograph, but now it's like, can I get a selfie? And you think, oh, their lives must be like that. Must be non-stop. You know, you go out to buy something at the shop, and there's folk wanting to clamor around you and get their photo taken with you, and so on. And you think, oh, I don't know if that life as a celebrity would be all that good, actually. You know, when you think about that, you don't have much peace, you don't have much space. It must have been similar to that for Jesus. He's hurting here. He needs time. He clearly wants time to take it all in. He is in mourning, and the crowd won't leave him alone. Now, it would have been a perfectly human reaction in that situation to be pretty frustrated, pretty annoyed, pretty exasperated, enervated. I don't know what other words there are. You'd be, pretty peeved, I think, about it all. That's a human reaction to the situation. Can I not have a moment for myself? You know? But instead, Jesus reacts differently, doesn't he? He has compassion on the crowd. So even in his own pain, even in his own turmoil, he sees the need in them. And the need in them, he prioritizes over his own need. He must be heartbroken, he must be exhausted, he must be confused, he must be frightened. Because if they're killing your cousin or whatever, they're probably going to want to lay their hands on you pretty soon. So pretty scary, all the emotions that come with mourning, and yet he still prefers the needs of the people to his own. And he starts blessing and healing the sick, we're told. He must have been drained, he must have been distraught, but with what little he has left, with what little energy he has left, he desires to still be a blessing to them. Now, something else that's running low, as well as the food and the resources in this situation, is the daylight. We're told that evening is approaching. And the disciples come to him and say, look, we're in a remote place here, Jesus. We're miles from the nearest shop, habitation, whatever. It's getting late. It's getting dark. We've got no food. Let's send them away. That's a instinctive response to the situation. Let them go and buy their own food in the villages and whatever. But Jesus' response to his disciples' judgment that they have little time, little light, little resources, little of everything, is to say to them, to challenge them, that they should meet the need right before them, right now, and be a blessing, just as he wants to be a blessing to the people. And Jesus replies, they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. You know, okay, so it's a practical solution. Send them away, they'll get fed. But Jesus says, you know what? You're fixated on what you don't have and what we lack. But here's what we're going to do. You give them something to eat. You're going to change the situation. But the disciples just can't see it. They can't accept that. They think, how's that? That's impossible. That was the word that was put out, impossible. They see the scarcity of their resources. They see the deprivation in the situation. They see poverty, they see defeat. But Jesus challenges them all the same. You give them something to eat. Instead of sensing defeat, instead of deflation or despair, instead desire to be a blessing, be the difference makers. Now, they're probably thinking, you're probably thinking that's all very good and well, but when you've just got 5 loaves and you've just got 2 fish, and there's thousands in front of you. Now remember, you probably heard this before, but if they say it's the feeding of the 5,000, but verse 21 makes it very clear that they've not counted the women and the children, and if you add them on, you're at 10,000 plus for sure. So this is a big crowd. And you've only got 5 loaves, and we've only got 2 fish. And how are we going to do this? How practically are we going to feed thousands? So you can imagine the disciples thinking that, but remember, that's because they're fixated on what they lack, on what they don't have. And Jesus is trying to get them to think differently, to think about what might be possible, to think about what amazing things could happen if they were willing and desiring to be a blessing to others. If only they would think like that and give thanks for what they have, then things might change. Now, some people say, well, the other Gospels aren't as explicit about this whole 5,000, 10,000 thing. It's interesting, in Mark and Luke's accounts, they're not as clear. In verse 21 here in Matthew, very clear that the women and children haven't been counted. But interestingly, in Mark and Luke, it's the language that they use. They use the word andres, which means adult males. Now, the word you would normally use for the people, the crowd, the people would be anthropoi. They don't. They choose this other word. So effectively, they are saying that. It's just that in the translation, we lose that into the English. But that is the situation. 10, 15,000 people maybe. And you've got 5 loaves, and you've got 2 fish. The math ain't mathing, as they say. That's what people say nowadays, isn't it? The math ain't mathing. So Jesus, who in that moment has already given an awful lot of himself, has emptied himself, has drained himself, who has also dealing with his grief, dealing with his sorrow, his tank must be running low, but whatever he's got left in the tank, he's going to give it for the people. And he encourages the disciples to think and act that way too. And notice what he does in the moment. And Sandy's asked, how does he do it? Well, I don't know how you would explain it by science, but I think this is how he does it. The critical point is where he takes the stuff and he takes the loaves and the 2 fish and he looks up to heaven. And this is how he does it, I think. This is how it happens. He looks up to heaven and he gives thanks to God for it. And he breaks the bread, he breaks the loaves, we're told, and he gives it to the disciples. So I think that's how he does it. And it's something in that act of thanksgiving and blessing that things change. Now, I can't explain that by science. I can't, give you a neat explanation of exactly how this was born, how that the fish was able to go around, just a couple of them, and those loaves were able to be shared out. Because we're told that people are well fed after this. So it's not like a tiny little crumb they get. They're well fed. And there's leftovers. So by science, I can't give you an explanation. But I think this is how he does it. Because he thanks God for what he has. And he asks that God bless it and bless it to the people. And Jesus is encouraging his disciples and us to think like this. To think not about what we lack, not about what we don't have, not about what we can't do, but instead to give thanks for what we can do, give thanks for what we do have, give thanks for who we are and the gifts that we have and so on, and ask for God to bless and desire in the asking and desiring for God to bless that to those around us. So those who are on the ball this morning will, and I said it earlier, will note the similarities to what Jesus later does at the Last Supper. He does it again at Emmaus after the resurrection, the breaking of the bread, the giving of it, the thanksgiving, the blessing. And Christians have done this for millennia, and I think This is why the Lord's Supper has become such a central part of our faith, because something happens in it. Something happens in that moment when you say thank you to God for the little that you have and ask him to bless it to the world, that you might become a blessing to your neighbors, to your family, to those that you work with, and those that you meet. Faced with the poverty, faced with the lack, faced with the scarcity, faced with the mess that's all around us all the time, faced with the low resources, Jesus encourages us to look up to heaven and give thanks for what we have and ask for God's blessing as we give to the people, to others. And what happens? They receive. And they receive abundantly and they receive amazingly. Thousands fed, 12 baskets left over. 12 is a biblically loaded, significant number. But we'll not go into that. Oh, I think it really is interesting is this idea that I shared with the children earlier. This idea is a teaching moment for the disciples. They saw the lack. They said, we've only got this. But Jesus says, well, you know what? You're going to have a lot more and you're going to carry it. You're going to feel the weight of it. You know, because you thought you just had this. But actually, you had so much more and you didn't realize. Well, now you do realize because you're going to have to cart it back to wherever they were going. And so he puts a basket in each of their hands. And those who said there wasn't enough, and he says, well, look, there is enough, isn't there? And there's loads left over. So the question is for us then, do we give thanks for the little that we have? And you probably think you don't have all that much. You know, there's no billionaires sitting in here today. In the world's eyes, you might not think you have much at all, and some people might agree. Some have much less, of course, much, much less than most of us. But what do we make of all of that? Do we give thanks for the little that we have, or are we fixated on the gap and the hole in the donut, the bit that we don't have? Are we fixated on what we lack, complaining about what we don't have and what we don't have to offer? And we're not just talking money here either. We're talking about our time. Some people say, I've got no time. I've got no time to do this and no time to serve God and no time to give to others. And some might also say, well, I don't have much in the way of talents, really. So it's treasures, time, and talents and more. We can be like this. We can think like this with all these things. That we can think we have little or nothing to offer. So I wonder, are you someone sitting here today thinking, well, I've got very little in the way of anything to give. How can I make a difference? Do you look at the world around you and think, oh, I just feel useless. I feel helpless. There's all this stuff going on and there's very little that I can do to help. Are you like the disciples, or are you more like the wee boy who I've not mentioned to this point? The wee boy who says, well, do you know what? I've only got the 2 fish and I've only got the 5 loaves, but I'm going to give it to this guy and his friends because I've seen what he's done and I've heard what he's been talking about. And do you know what? I believe that he can make a change. So the wee boy says, have it, take my stuff. He could have scampered away and gone behind a rock and eaten it himself. He doesn't do that. He says, you know what? I don't have much to offer. And maybe I can't make a big difference. There's only this little basket and a huge crowd. But do you know what? Have it. Take it. Do what you will with it. Are we more like that wee boy? I hope we are. That's what I want to be like. I think you would probably want to be like that too. What am I going to do with the little that I have? Are we going to sit there and bemoan and decry everything that we don't have? Are we going to, just... Where will that get us? Where will that lead us? Nowhere. What possible difference can we make if we have that mindset? But if our mindset is, and it's understandable, I'm not judging here, I probably do this myself at times. But what use is that to us? Instead, be like the little boy who sees the need and thinks, well, I don't have much, but what I have, Jesus, you can have it. You can take it. You can do what you like with it. Give thanks for what little you do have. Put it in God's hands. And you know what? You just don't know what a great blessing you might be to others. You just don't know what God can do with you and through you and with what you can give. No way could that boy have anticipated what would have happened. He couldn't have guessed at that. But he was willing to say, look, this is all I've got, so you do what you will with it. Don't get fixated on what you lack. Don't get fixated on what you don't have. Instead, give thanks for what you do have, what we do have. And don't despise what God has given you. And don't despise who God has made you. God loves you. You're made in his image. You have a lot to offer. And you very much are enough. He will do so much more with what little you have to give, more than you could realize. So give thanks, be a blessing, and let him show you what he can do. Amen.